Hi, my name is Dan, and this video is one in a series of videos about using materials in Unreal. And in this one, I'm going to look at basic texturing using materials. Okay, so I've got a standard third-person template map here with nothing else added, and I've got the starter content in here. Let's go up to the root of the content folder and create our first texture material. I'm going to call it damn it. I'm so inspired with my naming. Right, I'm going to open that up. Um, so let's get a texture. There's a whole lot of textures that are built into the starter content. So let's go looking in there. I do have a particular one in mind. It's in some ways it's not the most inspiring of textures, but it's quite useful in terms of showing how it's mapped onto a surface. Which is this checkerboard one. It's red and blue checks, and it's got a whole lot of speckled noise in it, as you can see on the preview there. Kind of black and red, and blue and white, really. I'm not going to mess about with the light interaction here, with the specularity, etc. It's the texture is what I really want to look at. So at the moment, we've just plugged that texture straight in to there, and I'm going to go up to the material. Now, I haven't applied the material yet. I'm going to stick it on this box. Go back into it and click apply. I'm going to work it out, and hopefully it'll appear on my box. Right. So the thing that's worth noting here is that we didn't have a huge amount of control over how that texture was put on that box. It's a bit odd. It's probably not quite how we want it. And what it uses is a thing called UV coordinates. So every point on this box, which is a static mesh, as well as having information about where that point should be in space, also has what's called so that's a spatial coordinate. It also has what's called a UV coordinate, which is where on the texture should be mapped onto that particular point. And this is done at the vertices of the static mesh. Let me open up that texture and talk through that a little bit more. Because once you've got hold of this concept, texturing becomes quite a lot easier. That's the one there. So this just gives us a flat view of the texture. It's not meant for being able to edit the texture. I'd need to use something like Photoshop or something like that. But this texture is a flat 2D object. And the question that is being asked is, how does this get plastered onto whatever object we put it on? Almost as if it was kind of pasted on as a big piece of paper with wallpaper paste. And the way that that's done is that information is contained within the model or the static mesh as some extra information. And if we wanted to have that corner of the texture to be at that particular point, so that's the top left, that would be 0, 0 in UV coordinates. And the bottom right, conversely, is 1, 1. And it tends to go from top left to bottom right. So if we want the midpoint here to be the point on the texture that is applied, that would be 0.5, 0.5. And that's all very well for the actual points themselves, but what the rendering does is it works out all the other points in between that we haven't provided information for. It does what's called interpolating. And so if you have a point on the surface which is meant to be somewhere around here, as long as you've got some points set up with the right UV coordinates, it will work out how far across it needs to be from those points that it got. So it triangulates it inside whatever triangle you've got and works out what point in the texture should be applied. And then it does what's called sampling, which is it picks the colour for that particular point out of the texture. and displays that on the pixel that's been displayed on the screen. So let's go back to the box that we've got. So this is quite, um, this box has these UV coordinates as built in as part of the information, and it's been stretched across. But we might want to alter the way that that's been done. And we can do that, in fact, by going into the material. And at the moment, it's using the standard UVs, which is the UV coordinates that are there as part of the model. But we can affect those and use the node texture coordinates. Texture coordinates, and within this, we've got some useful bits of information. Okay, so if we want to do U-tiling and V-tiling, and that means if we want to actually make the texture smaller so that it happens, it kind of gets to the edge of the texture and then redraws it, so it's as if it was, it's called tiling, putting more than one uh, version of the texture on. Then we change these numbers here, and the U-tiling is in terms of the texture as a square object is from left to right, and the V-tiling is up and down. So if we increase the U-tiling to 3, then they should now become rectangles. It's not quite so obvious on that ball there. Let's have a look at it on the cylinder. And you can see that these, what were squares, have now been stretched. And if you look on the top, it's definitely stretched. And if we click apply, we can see that. It takes a couple of seconds. Yeah, it's still, the UV coordinates are quite low and weird on this box. Let's go back and apply. Let's make it 10 by 10 to make it actually repeated several times across the surface. Okay. And apply that. There we go. So that's given us kind of a checker pattern across there. And we could add numbers in here if we want to offset it as well. So I think we can just do it by, if I added 1, we might not. Oh, sorry, that was to be constant. I'm not entirely sure how this is going to come out. So it's possibly not detectable in the way that we've done it here, but let's have a look on here. If we wanted it so that this line, for example, was all the way back here, we might be uh, moving this across and testing those numbers. But that gives an offset in the texture with the UV coordinates. If we want that. Okay. And we can apply this texture to all sorts of things. So I'm just going to cheekily put it on that character there. A little bit of a think about that. There was another setting in there, which you may or may not have noticed in the texture coordinates, which is, let's expand that out, texture coordinate index. So I had to go and look up what that is. And it turns out that actually a static mesh can have more than one set of UV coordinates in there if it wants. And so if I change that to 1, this particular object happens to have 2 sets of UV coordinates. And it's changed the way it's been displayed on there, because this thing has a different way of doing UV coordinates for 2. But let's see if it's made any changes to our box here. That is, it may be unnoticeable. It's actually, if you look at it, you can see that the squares on the top of the box are now different to the squares on the side of the box, and that's because the UV coordinates used for the top of the box in this set higher numbers to make it tiles more. Okay. And if you want to look at find out how many sets of UV coordinates are in a static mesh, we've got that Open there. We'll just double click on this to open the static mesh editor. And it's got details up here. It says UV channels 2. And if you can interpret them, you can even get them to be shown, but they're not actually mapped onto the object when you show them on the screen. So if I put in a value in here of the texture coordinates index of higher than 1, if I put it higher than 7, it complains at me, but if I put it 2, it should make no changes. It might be changed on here because this display object may have more sets of UV coordinates. But on here it's not changed, it looks the same. And what it's done is it's used put in 2 and it's used 1 because that's the nearest one that it's found. Okay. Let's change that back to 1 just to be nice. So that's kind of the principles of mapping textures onto the surface in a material. Some objects that we see are obviously a bit more complicated than this, and let's examine one of those. So I'm going to close that and save the changes to that. That's fine. And I'm going to go to one of my favourite objects, which is the in the starter content in the props, and it's this bench. It calls it a couch. And when we look at that, we can see that there's kind of silvery stuff on the arms. I'm zooming around a bit too fast here. And see-through bits and yellow bits, and the kind of response of the light is different on different parts of that. And if we look at the material, it looks a bit odd, so we're going to just double-click that to open it up, and you'll see that it doesn't look at all like the bench here. It's got some of the same colours, but it looks very odd indeed. And the reason for this is because the UV coordinates on that bench are done in such a way that they pick out certain parts of the texture. And if you look at this texture, it looks really quite odd. And part of what's going on here is that actually it's using the red, green, and blue channels for different aspects to be able to use different colours, and then these colours are set here to actually pick up those colours and display them on here. And this is we're going to find that texture and have a quick look at it because it's interesting. And actually, as you can see, quite a bit of it's see-through, and they're bits that are not being used or are being used for blank colour, and these different colours are actually triggering the different amounts of specularity, etc. As well. And this is what's called an unwrap, which is that these bits all cover the different parts of that bench, but it's done in a way that isn't necessarily seem logical, because when you wrap your texture coordinates on, as long as you do it right, you can use different parts of the texture for different parts of your object. And we don't have built into here like a facial unwrap, but you may have seen facial unwraps displayed elsewhere with the textures, and they look really weird because they're making what has to be mapped onto a face kind of stretched across a flat area. So that's how they achieve the complex materials like this bench here. And in fact, most 3D modeling programs will allow you to paint models and do all sorts of clever things, and then will work out those textures for you, those unwraps. So you don't necessarily have to do them yourself. And sometimes if you're wanting specific effects yourself that aren't available in the 3D modeling program, you might be creating something that's similar to what you want, and then taking the unwrapped texture and taking it into something like Photoshop and manipulating it yourself. So, for example, if they don't have like a fur pattern available, or making it look like it's been made out of tiger skin or something, you might need to alter it yourself to make those changes. Anyway, just as a last thing, I'm going to go back to our checkerboard pattern and apply that to that sofa there just to see what happens. So that's a quick look at texturing. We've just looked at color textures. The particular thing that I wanted to bring out was this concept of UV coordinates and how a texture is mapped onto a surface. Because once you understand that, texturing becomes a lot easier for you. Anyway, that's it from me for now.